Welcome back to the fourth of this week's series of daily devotionals as we piece together the series of events which culminate in Jesus' crucifixion. From the Last Supper, we have journeyed with Jesus to the Garden of Gethsemane through his arrest and trial before the Jewish Sanhedrin and his initial trial before Pontius Pilate. Luke then records for us that Jesus was sent to Herod Antipas, who really took no action other than to ridicule Jesus and send him back to Pilate, mockingly dressed up as a king. So, in today's reading, Jesus is returned to Pilate for judgment and sentencing. We know that Pilate had tried to pass responsibility for Jesus' case onto Herod, but now Jesus is plainly his responsibility. So we pick up the narrative in Luke 23, verse 13. Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and found no basis for your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. As you can see, he has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and then release him." Now, Pilate had previously questioned Jesus and found that he was guilty of nothing, deserving the death penalty. So when Pilate sent Jesus to Herod, perhaps he was thinking that, well, look, I've passed responsibility onto him, not my problem. But no, here is Jesus back again, still without a credible charge against him. We know from the other Gospels that Pilate's wife had warned Pilate to have nothing to do with Jesus. Pilate himself had determined to release him. Maybe some soldiers could beat him up a little bit more and that would appease the religious leaders. But the crowd, it seems, won't have it. Verse 18. But the whole crowd shouted, "Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us!" Barabbas had been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again, but they kept shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" For the third time, he spoke to them. "Why? What crime has this man committed? I have found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I will have him punished and then release him." So Pilate has declared Jesus innocent before the crowd 3 times now. Rather than being a question of justice, Pilate now famously just abdicates his responsibility and submits himself to the crowd. Everything's upside down. Verse 23. But with loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will. Now, of course, the other interesting character in this narrative is Barabbas. Now, we know that he was arrested by the Romans and was in prison awaiting his execution at that time. Officially, his crime was insurrection, that is, causing a riot in an attempt to overthrow the governing power, the same charge that Jesus was trumped up with. Murder was also involved for Barabbas, perhaps the murder of a Roman soldier in the course of the uprising, perhaps unconnected to that. If Barabbas were alive today, I think we'd call him a terrorist. He had been judged and condemned to death by torture, that is, by crucifixion. Now, we're not told exactly how it all went for Barabbas early on that Friday morning, but let's imagine together. Barabbas is sitting in prison, staring at his hands, which were soon to be pierced by nails. He's reeling with horror at his impending crucifixion. Then he hears the crowd outside the prison getting louder and louder. There are angry voices calling, "Crucify him, crucify him." He thinks he hears his own name. Then a jailer comes to unlock the door of his cell. Barabbas surely must think that the time for his execution has come as the jailer drags him out in front of Pilate and of this angry crowd. He looks at the crowd and then he looks across and sees Jesus? What's going on? He looks now at Pilate. Pilate seems concerned, his brows furrowed. Now, we know that Pilate has hit on this idea of, well, okay, I can offer the two of them and give the crowd the choice, Barabbas or Jesus. Surely the crowd's going to choose to release Jesus, this popular prophet and miracle worker from Galilee. He knows that it's a setup. We can only guess at what Barabbas might have known of Jesus, but we're putting ourselves in Barabbas's position for now, and the fleeting possibility of a reprieve has got to be another form of Roman torture, right? Not going to end well. The crowd is agitated. Everyone's yelling something. Pilate quietens them down and asks the question, shall I free Barabbas or Jesus? And to your amazement, the crowd, led by the Pharisees and religious leaders, start calling your name. Release Barabbas to us. Free Barabbas. The crowd has made its choice clear. Then all eyes, including your own, look across at Jesus. If you are to be freed, well, what of him? The crowd starts calling, crucify him, crucify him. And Pilate nods his agreement. As Jesus is led away, as a guard unlocks your shackles, right at that moment, you become the first person to understand the Christian gospel. Jesus the Christ is to die in your place. What happens next? Maybe Barabbas, totally free to do whatever he wants, probably stunned and bewildered. Maybe he joins in the procession that's making its way up to Calvary, to Golgotha. Perhaps Barabbas watches as Jesus is crucified. He watches and he knows that the nails that are impaling Jesus to the cross were meant for him. He sees the cross lifted up high into place, and he knows that he's the one who should be up there dying on the cross. Perhaps he says, that's me up there, or at least it should be me. Jesus is dying for me. Now, I don't know if this is exactly how it happened, but Barabbas is uniquely placed to understand the gospel in a more personal way than many, many others. Jesus Christ physically took his place on the cross, and he is absolutely free, pardoned, innocent, and with an entirely new life in front of him. If he could, at that moment, what might Barabbas have said to Jesus? What might you like to say to him now yourself?